The studio of The Late Show with Stephen Colbert glowed brightly under the stage lights. Applause erupted as the audience eagerly awaited an evening filled with laughter, with millions more tuning in through their screens. Two prominent figures sat across from each other, Stephen Colbert and Michael Jordan. But no one could have predicted what would happen next. Before diving into the story, comment where you're watching from and don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the latest stories. Stephen Colbert, with his trademark confident smile, sat in the host's chair, his eyes sparkling with intelligence and sarcasm. He was a master of satire, deftly turning any topic into witty tales for over 2 decades. Facing him was Michael Jordan, the greatest basketball player of all time. His iconic presence, tall, commanding, with a gaze that had stared down opponents on the court, was unmistakable. He represented a legacy of excellence, fiercely loyal to his competitive spirit and unafraid to confront anyone. Colbert kicked things off with a quip, his tone light but layered with intent. "Michael, are you here to school me on basketball or to teach me how to dunk on your generation's critics?" The audience roared with laughter, applause breaking out, but Jordan didn't flinch. He leaned forward, flashed a cool smile, and fired back instantly. "I'm here to speak the truth, Stephen, something you might not have tried after 2 decades sitting there, turning everything into a punchline." The laughter in the room died, replaced by surprised murmurs. Colbert hadn't expected such a swift counterattack. The studio atmosphere shifted instantly from jovial to tense. Cameras panned to the audience, some with jaws dropped, others whispering to each other. Stephen Colbert, though briefly caught off guard, quickly regained his composure, flashing the familiar smile viewers had seen thousands of times on air. He leaned forward, hands on the desk, his tone still dripping with signature sarcasm. "The truth, huh, Michael? So tell me, has satire changed the world, or do you think only your championship speeches can do that?" The audience chuckled, some clapped, clearly still on Colbert's side, but Jordan didn't waver. He sat up straight, arms crossed, his gaze locked on him. "Satire," Jordan began, his voice calm but cutting like a blade. "It's just an excuse for you to dodge responsibility, Stephen. You mock everything, sports, people, even serious issues. But what have you built from it? You make your viewers laugh, they go home, and the world stays the same. Meanwhile, I've stood on the court, faced real challenges, given real effort, and built something people remember." He paused for a beat, letting his words sink in. Scattered applause rose from one corner of the room, but most stayed silent, waiting for Colbert's response. Colbert clearly wasn't about to let Jordan take the upper hand on his home turf. He let out a soft laugh, the half-genuine, half-performed kind he often used to lighten the mood. "Michael, I'm not dodging anything," he said, his confidence returning. "Laughter is my weapon. I expose the truths people like you want to hide, the overhyped legacies, the empty promises of greatness. I don't need to stand on a court to change how people think. I do it right here, every night, with millions watching." The crowd erupted in applause. "Woo-hoo!" ringing out from the front row. Colbert nodded to them as if he'd just scored a major point. But Jordan didn't budge. He tilted his head, offering a thin smile, the kind that signaled he was about to land a decisive blow. "Really, Stephen?" he asked, his tone both challenging and mocking. "So, what have you changed besides making people laugh for 30 seconds? You say you expose the truth, but all I see is you tossing cheap jokes at people trying to do real work. I've fought opponents, critics, the world, to defend what I've built. And you? You sit here, safe in the studio, making money by mocking others without ever putting yourself at risk." Beitao. He emphasized each final word, his gaze piercing straight through Colbert. The audience stirred. The earlier laughter gave way to whispers, some nodding in agreement, others exchanging confused glances. Colbert held his smile, but a flicker of irritation crossed his eyes. He tapped his fingers lightly on the desk. A small habit loyal viewers knew meant he was thinking of a comeback. "Michael," he said, his tone less playful now, "you say I don't put myself at risk? I've been criticized, threatened, sued for what I say on air. I don't just sit here reading a script. I question people in power, like you and your legacy, and I do it my way." Jordan didn't let him finish. He cut in, his voice rising slightly, but still perfectly controlled. Questioning. "No, Stephen. You throw stones and hide behind laughter. You don't face real consequences. You've got a team writing your scripts, a room full of people ready to clap for anything you say. I'm different. I've stood alone on the court, no script, no hiding place. You call that risk? I call it privilege." He paused, staring straight at Colbert, letting his words hang in the air. The scattered applause from Colbert's loyal fans faded, replaced by curiosity. Some in the crowd began looking at Jordan differently, no longer just a sports icon, but a formidable opponent. Colbert pursed his lips, clearly searching for a way to regain control. He leaned forward, trying to slip back into his familiar satirical style. "Michael, you make it sound like I'm some clown in a circus. But if I'm not doing anything, why are you here on my stage defending your honor?" He winked at the crowd, hoping to reel back the laughter, but Jordan didn't take the bait. He shot back instantly. "I'm here because you've mocked what I and millions of others respect, Stephen. You think it's a joke, but to us, it's real life. You can laugh, but don't expect me to sit quietly while you turn it into a circus." He paused, his eyes locked on Colbert, daring him to find a response weighty enough to counter him. Colbert took a deep breath, trying to lighten the mood with a quip. "Okay, Michael, you're tougher than I thought, but we're just getting started, right?" He smiled, but this time the audience's laugh was sparse, not enough to drown out Jordan's strength. Jordan nodded slightly, as if agreeing, but his eyes made one thing clear. He was ready for whatever Colbert threw next. Stephen Colbert kept the smile on his face, but it no longer felt natural. His fingers tapped faster on the desk, a clear sign that Jordan's last line, "Don't expect me to sit quietly while you turn it into a circus," had struck a nerve. The audience sat still, their eyes shifting between the two, waiting to see who'd strike next. Colbert, with the seasoned instincts of a veteran host, tried to regain the upper hand. He leaned forward, his tone laced with a hint of sarcasm. "Michael, you talk like I'm the enemy of truth, but I'm just a storyteller through laughter. What about you? What story do you tell standing on that court?" Jordan didn't answer right away. He took a deep breath, his hands uncrossing and resting lightly on his knees. His gaze remained fixed on Colbert, but now it carried a deeper resolve. "Fine, Stephen," he said, his voice calm but sharp as a freshly honed blade. "You want a story? I'll give you one. Not to make you laugh, but to make you understand." The audience murmured, some leaning forward, curious where he was going with this opener. Colbert wasn't sure if this was a chance to slip in a joke or the prelude to another attack. "There was a guy I worked with," Jordan began, his voice slow but steady, as if each word was carefully chosen. "His name was Jake. He was young, smart, and believed in what we were doing on the team. He wasn't the one in front of the cameras, not a star player, but one of the quiet workers, training staff, organizing practices, making sure everything ran smoothly so people like me could step onto the court. Jake was the kind of person you'd never notice, Stephen, but without him, we wouldn't have gotten far." He paused for a beat, his eyes scanning the crowd, ensuring they were listening. The studio fell silent, only the faint breathing of the audience audible. Colbert opened his mouth, perhaps to crack a joke and break the tension, but Jordan raised a hand, signaling him to wait. He shrugged, leaned back, and let him continue. "Jake worked tirelessly," Jordan said, his voice starting to carry a hint of emotion. "He believed we were fighting for something bigger than ourselves, a championship, a legacy. But then one day, one of your jokes, Stephen, or someone like you, changed everything." Jordan leaned forward, his gaze now icy. "Your show did a segment on our team. You called us overpaid egomaniacs, Jordan's puppets. Your audience laughed like they always do. But Jake, he got caught up in that joke. Someone filmed him working behind the scenes, added funny captions, and turned him into a laughingstock on social media. He wasn't a celebrity, didn't have hundreds of thousands of followers to push back. He was just a regular guy, and suddenly the whole world knew him as a fool." Colbert pursed his lips, clearly uneasy with where this was headed. His eyes darted between Jordan and the audience. "And then what?" he asked, his tone trying to sound casual. "What's that got to do with me?" "I'm not done," Jordan replied, his voice firm, cutting off his attempt to steer the story. After that video, Jake got let go. Not because he did anything wrong, but because of the public pressure from people who thought laughing at him was harmless. He lost his job, his dignity, and, for a while, his faith in what he'd been fighting for. He told me he felt like the whole world had turned on him, all because of a joke he never signed up for. He paused, letting the words sink in. The studio was now dead silent. No murmurs, no laughter. "But here's the important part, Stephen," Jordan continued, his voice now carrying a new strength. "Jake didn't give up. He came back, worked with us again. Not for the money, but because he believed in what we were building. He didn't need the spotlight. didn't need applause. He just needed to know his work mattered. And today, he's one of the people I trust most. Not because he's the best, but because he's loyal. Because he understands real success isn't about fleeting laughs, but about building something lasting with people who believe in you. He sat back, his eyes never leaving Colbert. "That's the difference between you and me, Stephen," he said, his tone now steely. "I work with people like Jake, people who put their hearts into what they believe. And you? You make a living turning them into punchlines, then forget them when the stage lights go out. You call that storytelling, I call that sabotage." The studio fell into complete silence. The whispers were gone, replaced by wide-eyed stares, shifting between Jordan and Colbert. Some nodded faintly, as if agreeing with his story. Colbert tried to jump in, his voice now a bit rushed. "Michael, I don't target individuals like that. I go after the system, the people in power, like you and your legacy. That's not sabotage, that's questioning." He gave a small laugh, hoping to lift the mood, but the audience's response was sparse, not enough to break the weight of Jordan's words. Jordan cut him off again, no hesitation. "This isn't the time for jokes, Stephen. This is real life, not your comedy script. You might aim at the system, but you've hurt people like Jake, people who don't have a voice to fight back. You think it's harmless, but I've seen the fallout, and I'm here to tell you it's not harmless at all." Jordan stopped, his gaze burning into Colbert. He sat still, the smile completely gone from his face. The audience, some with heads bowed, others staring at Jordan with newfound respect. The crowd's breathing was the only sound left in the studio. Colbert took a deep breath, clearly searching for a rebuttal, but for the first time that night, he seemed at a loss for words. Jordan sat calmly, hands crossed again, his face serene but commanding. Michael Jordan's story about Jake, the guy turned into a punchline by media like Stephen Colbert, left a deep mark in the room. The audience's eyes shifted between admiration for Jordan and unease toward Colbert. He sat there, hands no longer tapping, but gripping the desk's edge as if trying to hold his ground. His trademark smile was gone, replaced by a rare, tense expression. Jordan, in contrast, sat upright, arms crossed, his sharp gaze like an arrow notched and ready to strike its final target. Colbert took a deep breath, attempting to reclaim the mood by slipping back into his familiar style. "Michael," he said, his tone aiming for lightness, but betraying a slight tremor. "I'm sorry for what happened to your Jake, really. But you can't blame me or anyone in this business for every consequence out there. We do this to entertain, to make people think, not to ruin someone's life." He shrugged, offering a weak smile, hoping the crowd would clap like they always did. But this time, the applause was faint, scattered, and quickly faded into the thick silence. Jordan didn't let him off the hook. He leaned forward, his eyes locked on Colbert, his voice low but brimming with power, like an undercurrent ready to swallow everything. "You're sorry, Stephen?" he asked, his tone tinged with mockery but unrelenting. "You say you don't mean to ruin anyone, but have you ever asked who's behind your success? The writers, the stage crew, the people working so you can sit here every night and throw those jokes. Do you ever think about them? Or are you too busy laughing at others to realize you'd be nothing without them?" Jordan's question hung in the air, sharp as a blade, piercing straight into Colbert's core. The room was deathly silent, eyes wide and unblinking, as if they'd just witnessed an unbelievable moment. Colbert pursed his lips, his hands gripping the desk tighter, clearly struggling to find a response. He opened his mouth, his voice faltering slightly. "I don't deny my team, Michael. They're amazing, and I'm grateful for them. But I'm here to do my job, make people laugh, ask questions. I'm not a hero, and I don't pretend to be. Joe." He gave a small laugh, trying to slip back into his humorous style, but the smile now looked forced, lifeless. Jordan didn't give him a chance to escape. He fired back instantly, his voice rising slightly, but still perfectly controlled. "That's exactly the problem, Stephen. You choose laughter over responsibility. You think you're clever, sitting here safe in this studio with an audience clapping at every punchline. But I see something else. I see a man hiding behind witty remarks because he's afraid to face the real world, afraid to stand for something, afraid to own what he causes. You call that a job? I call that cowardice." The audience's breathing seemed to stop. Colbert's eyes widened, his face stiffening, the usual confidence nowhere to be found. He opened his mouth, about to say something, but no words came out. Jordan sat still, his gaze burning into him, unwavering. The crowd felt the weight of the word cowardice, a term no one had ever dared use to describe Stephen Colbert, the man who'd built a career mocking the powerful. But now, he was the one cornered. Colbert cleared his throat, trying to regain his composure. "Michael," he said, his voice shakier now, "you're turning me into the villain in your story. I'm not hiding from anything. I put myself at risk every day, criticized, hated, to say what I believe is right. You might not like how I do it, but don't say I'm not accountable." He looked out at the audience, hoping to find support in their eyes, but all he got were blank faces, curiosity, and a few hesitant nods, tilting toward Jordan. Jordan didn't let him finish. Briskly he cut in, his voice now ringing like a bell, clear and irresistible. "You call sitting here, protected by your team, cheered by your audience, a risk? I've faced the toughest players on the court every night, Stephen. No script, no friendly crowd, no place to hide. I put my career, my reputation, and my legacy on the line with everything I do. What about you? You toss a joke and let others deal with the fallout. You're not the villain. You're just not brave enough to truly stand up." The studio was devoid of applause, laughter, or any sound beyond the hurried breaths of the crew, frozen behind the cameras. Colbert bowed his head for a second, his hands releasing the desk's edge and resting on his lap, as if he'd just been defeated. He looked up at Jordan, his eyes no longer sarcastic but carrying something deeper, perhaps confusion, perhaps acknowledgement. He opened his mouth, but this time no quip emerged, no rebuttal spoken. He just sat there, silent, for the first time in his career, at a loss for words. Jordan sat back, his hands crossing again, his face calm, but his eyes still ablaze. He didn't need to say more. His question, his argument, had done what no one expected, rendered Stephen Colbert, the master of words, completely speechless. The room was swept up in the moment. A woman in the front row whispered to her friend, "He just knocked him out on his own turf." But the whisper was faint, but in the studio's silence, it rang out like a proclamation. Colbert took a deep breath, trying to reclaim his voice. "Michael," he began, but his voice cracked, so weak it was almost inaudible. He stopped, looked down at his hands, then up again. His eyes were no longer those of a confident host, but of someone forced to confront something deep within. Jordan didn't smile, didn't gloat. He just looked at him, his gaze steady, as if saying, "I've said my piece, now it's your turn." Colbert sat there, his eyes dropping for a moment before lifting, searching for himself amid the wreckage Jordan had left behind. The audience didn't move, their gazes locked on the two on stage, as if watching a boxing match where the knockout blow had just landed, but the fight wasn't quite over. Jordan sat still, hands crossed, face calm, but eyes still burning like a warrior, victorious, yet ready for the next round. Colbert took another deep breath, his shoulders rising and falling, as if trying to shake off the weight of the moment. He lifted his head, his eyes no longer vacant, but sparking with a new resolve. He leaned forward, hands on the desk, his voice starting shaky but growing steadier. "Michael, you're good, really good. I've got to admit, you just silenced me, something not many have done in 20 years. He gave a small laugh, not sarcastic, but tinged with sincerity, and the audience let out a few scattered chuckles, as if eager to ease the tension. "But I feel like I need to speak up for my perspective, my legitimacy, don't I?" Jordan raised an eyebrow, not responding, but his eyes silently dared him. "Go ahead and try." Colbert pressed on, his voice now stronger, though still carrying the tremor of someone pushed to their limit. "You're right about one thing, Michael," he said, his tone deliberate, as if choosing each word with care. "I don't always think about the people who get me here, my team, the writers, the crew. They're the backbone of this show, and maybe I've taken that for granted. I'm not perfect, I'll own that. Bechao." He paused, looking out at the crowd, and this time a few gentle claps rose up like a small encouragement. But Colbert didn't stop there. He leaned closer to Jordan, his eyes sharpening, as if he'd rediscovered a piece of himself. "But you're wrong about one thing," he said, his tone now carrying a hint of defiance. "You say I hide behind laughter, that I don't take responsibility. I disagree. I've spent my career questioning people in power, people like you and your legacy. I don't just make people laugh, Michael. I make them think. I make them doubt. I make them see the world in ways they hadn't considered. That's not cowardice. That's how I fight." The audience stirred, the applause growing a bit louder, as if sensing Colbert was clawing his way back. He pointed at Jordan, his voice rising, filled with passion. "What about you, Michael? You talk about responsibility, about standing up for what you believe, but you're loyal to a legacy millions question, a man accused of arrogance, of putting himself above the team. Is that responsibility, or is it blindness? You say I hide behind laughter, but are you hiding behind loyalty? The studio buzzed with murmurs, some nodding with Colbert, others looking to Jordan, awaiting his response. This was his strongest counter of the night, a final push to turn the tide, to prove he wasn't entirely cornered. The cameras panned to Jordan's face, and for the first time that night, he smiled. Not a triumphant grin, but a calm, almost knowing one. He leaned forward, his voice still steady but brimming with authority. I've been waiting for you to ask that, Stephen. He paused for a beat, letting the words sink into the audience, then continued. I'm loyal to what I believe is right, not just to myself, but to a vision of excellence. You might not agree with me, my legacy, or the millions who admire it, but at least I'm not hiding behind anything. I've stood on the court every day, no script, no friendly audience, and I've said what I believe, whether I'm hated, criticized, or mocked by people like you. That's the difference between us. You might make people think, but I make people act. Jordan's words rang out like a declaration, not just answering Colbert, but reinforcing his stance. Colbert sat back, his eyes no longer defiant, but carrying a hint of reluctant respect. He nodded slightly, as if conceding Jordan's counter had parried his perfectly. You're really tough, Michael, he said, his tone softer now, almost genuine. I don't know what to say to that. Maybe you're right, partly, but I still believe in what I do. Thought. Jordan nodded back, saying nothing more, as if he didn't need to. He'd said all he had to, and the studio felt it. Applause began to rise, slow at first, then louder, not for one or the other, but for both, a clash that was more than an argument, a living lesson in belief and accountability. Colbert looked out at the audience, his smile returning, but this time with a different shade, not arrogant confidence, but rare humility. He raised a hand, as if to calm the air, and said, Okay, I think we just had a real moment here. He doesn't mess around, folks. Jordan gave a small smile, the first sign of warmth that night, but his eyes remained resolute. He didn't need to say more to prove he'd won, not by crushing Colbert entirely, but by forcing him to look at himself. The audience felt the shift in the air, from tension to something deeper. The cameras panned across both their faces, capturing this rare moment. Colbert admitting partial defeat, Jordan standing firm like an unshakable mountain. The atmosphere in the room was no longer as tense as it had been minutes before, shifting to a state of reflection, as if everyone was wondering, what did we just learn from all this? Colbert raised a hand, signaling for quiet, and the applause tapered off. He leaned forward, looking straight at Jordan, his tone no longer confrontational, but carrying an unexpected sincerity. Michael, I've got to say this. You're a formidable opponent. I've done this show thousands of nights, met all kinds of people, but no one's made me stop and rethink like you just did. He gave a small laugh, a self-deprecating one, and the audience responded with a few warm chuckles, as if they sensed him opening up. You're tough, you're smart, and you don't hold back. I respect that. I really do. Jordan nodded slightly, showing a trace of softness for the first time that night. He smiled, not a victorious smirk, but the smile of someone who knew he'd been heard. Thank you, Stephen, he said, his voice gentler, but still holding its inner strength. I didn't come here to take you down. I came to say what I believe is right, and I think we've had a real conversation. Something that doesn't happen often on TV these days. The audience broke into soft applause, some nodding in agreement, as if they felt the authenticity in his words. Colbert nodded, his eyes now showing genuine curiosity. So, Michael, he said, if I've learned anything from you tonight, what is it? What do you want me, or this audience, to take away when we leave here? He gestured to the crowd, as if inviting Jordan to deliver a final message, not just to him, but to everyone watching. Jordan took a deep breath, his hands uncrossing and resting lightly on his knees. He looked at Colbert, then turned to the audience, his gaze sweeping across each row, as if speaking to every single person there. Success isn't about who laughs louder, Stephen, he began, his voice slow but resonant. It's not about who talks more or who gets the most applause. Success is about who's still standing when the laughter stops, when the stage lights go out, when all that's left is what you've built and the people still by your side. That's what I've learned from my career, from people like Jake, and that's what I want you and everyone here to think about. The audience listened, some nodding slowly, others whispering to each other, as if Jordan's words had struck something deep within them. Colbert leaned back, his eyes on Jordan with unmistakable respect. He nodded, as if processing what he'd said, then replied, "You know, Michael, I think you just taught me, and maybe this audience, a lesson I didn't expect when we started tonight. I always thought laughter was how I made my mark, but maybe you're right. There are things that matter more, like the people standing behind you." Jordan gave a small smile, saying nothing more, as if he knew his message had landed. Colbert continued, his voice now carrying a rare sincerity. "I don't agree with you on everything. God knows I don't. But I've got to admit, you have a way of making people rethink. Maybe I underestimated you, and I'm sorry for that." He extended his hand, an unexpected but natural gesture, and Jordan shook it, a firm handshake full of mutual respect. The audience applauded again, starting slow, then growing louder, not to cheer a winner or loser, but to honor a moment where two people from different worlds found common ground. Colbert with his genuine smile, Jordan with his steady gaze. It was the image of a clash that exceeded anyone's expectations. Colbert laughed a bit louder, saying, "I think we just did something special here, folks. He's no joke, but I'll still try to make him laugh next time if he comes back." Deo. Jordan let out a soft chuckle, the first sign of ease that night. "I'll consider it, Stephen," he replied, his tone playful, yet still composed. He stood, adjusted his jacket, and walked off stage with undiminished confidence, leaving the audience in a wave of even louder applause. Colbert watched him go, shaking his head with an admiring smile, then turned to the crowd. "All right, we need a commercial break after that. I need a glass of water, and maybe some time to recover. Marciao." As Jordan disappeared backstage, the applause still echoed in the studio, but beneath it was a different feeling, a sense that everyone had just witnessed a profound lesson about responsibility, loyalty, and the true meaning of success. Colbert settled back into his chair, looking out at the audience, and for the first time that night, he didn't try to make them laugh. He just nodded, as if to say, "He's right, partly, but enough to change something. Yes, it's As the stage lights of the late show dimmed and the outro music played, everyone in the studio began to stand, but no one rushed to leave. Murmurs spread through the room, not the shallow chatter after a typical comedy episode, but lively, emotional discussions. A middle-aged man in the middle row turned to his friend, whispering, "He just made Colbert rethink. I've never seen him like that." "Dog." A young woman nearby nodded, adding, "I don't follow basketball much, but he's got a point. There's something really powerful about him." Such whispers echoed everywhere, blending into an unstoppable wave of reflection. Beyond the studio, the clash's impact quickly spread outside as the broadcast ended. Social media erupted with reactions from live attendees and viewers at home. On X, the hashtag #Jordan vs Colbert shot to the top trends, with thousands of posts appearing in minutes. One user wrote, "Michael Jordan just turned Colbert's stage into his court. That wasn't an interview, it was a slam dunk." Another post, from a loyal Colbert fan, countered, "Colbert didn't lose. He gave him space to talk and kept his humor. That's his style." The online debate split into two clear camps. One hailing Jordan as the legend who took down old media, the other defending Colbert as the unshakable satire king. Mainstream media didn't sit on the sidelines either. Articles popped up right after, with attention-grabbing headlines like "Basketball Legend Silences Stephen Colbert" and "The Late Show Showdown, Who Really Won?" A commentator from a major outlet wrote, "Jordan brought a new style of debate, blunt, uncompromising, and unafraid to face giants like Colbert. He's a symbol of a legacy that no longer fears traditional media." Meanwhile, another analysis backed Colbert. "He didn't lose, he chose to listen, and that's what a smart host does when facing a tough opponent." Despite differing angles, all agreed on one thing. This was a memorable event, not just for its drama, but for the deeper meaning it carried. In the studio, as people filed out, some lingered near the exits, sharing their thoughts. A young man with glasses said to his friend, "I think they're both right in their own way. Colbert makes you laugh and reflect, but Jordan, he makes you feel like you have to do something." An older woman nodded. "I've watched Colbert for years, but this is the first time I've seen him truly challenged. That guy's no joke." These reactions weren't just fleeting emotions. They reflected a shift in how the audience viewed both figures. Online, clips of the showdown racked up millions of views, with comments flooding the official Late Show video. "Watch out, Jordan just taught Colbert a lesson in responsibility," one wrote. No, Colbert's still the king. He let him speak and kept his cool, another replied. The debate raged on, but it was clear Jordan had cemented himself as a new force, while Colbert was forced to reflect on his approach, something he rarely did publicly before. As the showdown between Michael Jordan and Stephen Colbert settled, what lingered wasn't just a memorable night on The Late Show, but a lasting mark on its audience. In a world full of laughter and contention, Jordan proved the truth, spoken with conviction, can outshine any joke. He stepped onto Colbert's stage, not just to defend his legacy, but to remind everyone that success isn't about a fleeting spotlight, but about what we build and who we keep by our side. Colbert, though cornered, showed he's more than a comic storyteller. He's someone willing to listen, if only this once. This battle had no clear winner or loser, but it left a big question. Whose side are you on? Jordan with his unrelenting candor, or Colbert with his knack for turning tension into lessons? Whatever your answer, this moment changed how we view responsibility, loyalty, and the power of words. The clash between Michael Jordan and Stephen Colbert mirrored a modern America where divides between generations, legacies, and media grow ever deeper. Jordan, with his blunt style and loyalty to a competitive vision, represented the enduring power of action, unafraid to challenge old norms, like when he grilled Colbert on the responsibility behind his laughter. Colbert, in contrast, embodied traditional media, using satire to question, but sometimes seen as detached from reality, like the story of Jake, a man hurt by careless jokes. This event reflected today's U.S. Social media and TV aren't just entertainment, but battlegrounds where personal honor and communal values are tested daily. The lesson from this story lies in how Jordan stressed the importance of building with those who believe in you. As he said, success is about who's still standing when the laughter stops. In a U.S. context where division estranges families and friends, this reminds us to cherish real connections, not just chase crowd approval like Colbert initially did with his clapping audience. When Colbert admitted he sometimes overlooked his team, it was a wake-up call. Don't let personal ambition overshadow gratitude. Live like Jordan when he spoke of Jake, steadfast in belief, but never forgetting the quiet ones beside you. In a chaotic America, true success isn't about the noise, but the foundation you build with those who stay. Don't forget to hit subscribe to join us in exploring more real moments like the Jordan-Colbert showdown. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video for more thought-provoking stories.